Red flashing lights and reflections swept across the industrial park on the outskirts of Houston as federal forces moved in. Dozens of armored vehicles blocked all entrances. FBI and DEA tactical teams split into assault groups, moving silently through the rusted chain-link fence. Inside, the seemingly abandoned warehouses suddenly glowed in infrared scopes. Continuous heat signatures indicated activity throughout the night. Intel confirmed, this chain of facilities wasn't a machine shop or a logistics hub. It was the staging area for one of the largest human and drug trafficking networks ever documented in Texas. From the observation chopper, the central screen displayed strange movement patterns between convenience stores, gas stations, and peripheral warehouses. The connecting routes formed a closed-loop operational map, a business operating in the shadows, where people were turned into living cogs in the drug supply chain. The financial system, vehicles, and manpower were all concealed under the guise of legitimate businesses. Over 6 months, dozens of homeless individuals vanished without a trace. They never entered a social support center, nor were their movements tracked. All digital footprints were wiped clean, as if erased from the map. When the intelligence data was collated, analysts recognized an entirely new criminal model. No more street gangs or traditional smuggling rings. This was an organization run with a corporate structure complete with accountants, coordinators, security, and logistics operations. People were lured with promises of shelter and odd jobs, but were actually locked up and forced to manually transport drugs. No phones, no bank accounts, no electronic traces, the perfect way to bypass all federal automated surveillance tools. The FBI, in coordination with the DEA and the Texas Highway Patrol, established a covert investigation team. A command center was set up, completely isolated from civilian communication systems. Financial specialists analyzed suspicious payment chains across dozens of anonymous accounts. Each transfer was only a few $1,000s, but the frequency and routes suggested a massive cash flow being fractionalized and laundered through shell companies registered in Texas, Mexico, and the Caribbean. The transactions were labeled shipping fees, consulting services, vehicle rental contracts, all coinciding with the operating hours of the suspected warehouses. Simultaneously, the physical surveillance team deployed a secret camera system around the warehouses. Night footage recorded unmarked small trucks picking up homeless people at street corners across downtown Houston, Austin, and Dallas. They were taken to the warehouses. A few hours later, each person left with sealed packages, disappearing into traffic. Specialists confirmed, this was a drug supply chain using humans instead of hardware, a model never seen before. When analyzing the heat signatures from satellites, engineers noted the buildings operated 24/7, with occupant density at times 10 times the safety standard. One 200-square-meter warehouse showed over 40 distinct living heat sources. That meant people were being held captive. At this point, all assumptions turned into action. Commander Donovan gave immediate approval for the plan, codenamed Clean Streets. The execution order was issued simultaneously to the FBI, DEA, and state task forces. Units gathered imagery, swept communication frequencies, and modeled suspect escape routes. Analysts identified at least 11 facilities that needed to be hit concurrently to prevent the destruction of evidence. The priority targets: rescue the victims, seize the data, and neutralize the financial system behind it. Forces deployed in silence. Highways were covertly controlled. Civilian drones in the area were neutralized with jamming equipment. In the darkness, the assault teams approached the designated locations one by one. Everyone understood that a single misstep could trigger an alarm, allowing the criminals to vanish. There was no longer any doubt the biggest operation in Texas in years had begun, and what they were about to find would exceed all predictions about organized crime. On the screens at the Houston Command Center, data streams overlapped: financial transactions, satellite imagery, and the movement routes of dozens of vehicles. Everything was slowly pieced together into a map of an industrial-scale criminal system. Signs indicated that rows of convenience stores, gas stations, and warehouses were merely covers for a closed-loop human and drug trafficking network, where people were used as living transportation tools. The FBI's financial analysis team discovered dozens of shell companies registered in Texas, Mexico, and the Caribbean. They had no real employees or offices but executed hundreds of transactions weekly. Each transfer was only a few $1,000s, but the total reached tens of millions, disguised as transport fees or logistics services. All were designed to slip past automated bank surveillance systems. Concurrently, the DEA deployed infrared drones and ground reconnaissance around the industrial parks. The results showed multiple facilities operating all night despite having no registered shift work. Unmarked small trucks entered and exited on a fixed schedule, carrying homeless individuals from downtown Houston, Austin, and Dallas. Cameras recorded them being led into the warehouses, and a few hours later, leaving with sealed packages. None of them were seen again. Facial recognition specialists identified one of the supervisors at the main handover points as an international money laundering fugitive. This match confirmed the entire system was centrally coordinated. Beneath the veneer of legitimate business was an organizational structure with a hierarchy, budget, and a tight network for manpower control. Data from satellite thermal sensors showed the density of people inside some warehouses was triple the safety limit, indicating detention. The technical team reconstructed movement diagrams. From Houston, the flow of people and goods radiated to Dallas and Austin, then returned through the Mexican border. Dozens of trips daily, with no electronic trace whatsoever. When decoding a hard drive recovered from a gas station, investigators found a receipt code table using color symbols, along with a list of times, addresses, and the number of people being distributed. The data structure showed the organization operating as a genuine business, with procedures, managers, and a clandestine accounting system. The FBI's consolidated report to the Department of Justice described this as a hybrid criminal model, combining human trafficking, drug trafficking, and money laundering within the same logistics chain. The level of sophistication rendered traditional surveillance measures ineffective. When the final map was completed, 11 hot spots glowed red on the screen, each a fully operational facility. All routes converged on the warehouse district on the outskirts of Houston. There, the command team understood that the investigation time was over. Clean Streets had its targets, and the final assault preparation phase officially began. A quiet morning was shattered when a homeless man walked into the downtown Houston police station. His clothes were torn, his face pale, but his voice was enough to make the entire shift freeze. He claimed he had escaped from a warehouse where dozens of people were being held captive in the basement, forced to deliver drugs daily. The story sounded like fiction, but every detail matched the facts the FBI and DEA were tracking. The witness was immediately transported to the Federal Center for debriefing. In the interrogation room, the investigation team listened to a statement that lasted nearly 4 hours. The man described how he was lured with promises of work, taken to the warehouse, and given one meal a day and a packet of drugs. They called it energy to work. Anyone who failed to complete their task was beaten, and anyone who ran away vanished. In the basement, the captives were not allowed to see daylight, only hearing the sound of the steel door locking every night. Some fell ill, others stopped breathing and were taken away by truck in the middle of the night. When the medical team checked him, the witness's body was covered in bruises, minor burns, and skin damage from chemicals. Tests confirmed long-term exposure to fentanyl and methamphetamine. The traces matched the type of substance produced in the warehouses the DEA was monitoring. The first biological evidence had appeared, and it legally justified the entire raid plan under preparation. From the testimony, the technical team reconstructed the internal structure of the warehouse. The diagram matched the infrared images previously obtained: a main floor for goods, and a lower level with narrow rooms showing high concentrations of human heat. Investigators understood this was not just a drug storage facility, it was a place for detaining people for forced labor exploitation. The psychological analysis unit confirmed the witness was genuinely panicked, with no signs of fabrication. His descriptions of being handed packages and being tracked by color codes matched the data table the DEA had recovered from the hard drive. Every detail, every number, every symbol matched perfectly. It was no longer conjecture. This was real person, real event evidence. From the command center, Donovan reported directly to the Department of Justice. The case was upgraded from a drug crime investigation to a federal human trafficking and forced labor crime. The emergency action order was activated. A flurry of encrypted calls went out to tactical teams in Houston, Dallas, and Austin. The plan for a simultaneous attack began to take shape on the electronic board. While the witness was being transferred to a protected location, the FBI completed the forensic report, collecting DNA samples, injury photos, and chemical traces. All were sent directly to the lab in Quantico for verification. The preliminary results returned in just a few hours. The type of meth found in the blood sample matched the compound from the underground labs being monitored in Texas. The investigation had a clear direction. The scattered pieces now formed a complete picture. People were turned into living drug transportation vessels. It was no longer intelligence or speculation. The evidence was present, the witness confirmed, and Commander Donovan knew that any delay meant more lost lives. Clean streets shifted to combat-ready status. At the Houston Command Center, the light from dozens of monitors reflected on the strained faces of the commanding officers. All data gathered over the past 6 months, money flow, movement signals, infrared images, and witness testimony had been merged into a single target map. 11 facilities across 3 cities were marked with blinking red dots. That was where people were detained, where drugs were portioned, and where the black money circulated daily. Donovan, the federal commander, approved the emergency action plan. Operation Clean Streets was divided into 4 axes. The FBI was responsible for assaulting the key warehouses in Houston, the DEA for Dallas, state police forces coordinated highway blockades, and Border Patrol took charge of intercepting the flow of people from Mexico. All civilian communication systems in the target areas were switched to a secure frequency, ensuring no information leakage. The FBI's technical division installed listening devices for the internal frequency the criminals typically use to communicate between facilities. Scattered codes were deciphered in a secure room. New shipment, personnel change, logistics payment, all were veiled symbols for moving people and drugs. One phrase repeated many times caught Donovan's attention: night inventory. Analysis showed this was the internal signal for a major move about to happen. If they didn't act immediately, the entire network could vanish in a matter of hours. Tactical teams were summoned urgently. The area map projected on the wall displayed approach routes, wind direction, population density, and potential for resistance. Each group received its specific assignment: entry, rescue, data seizure, and neutralization. Every maneuver was scripted down to the minute. Field medics and mobile forensic teams were also dispatched to waiting positions. No one spoke much. Each person checked their weapon, radio, armor, and signed the execution order. Analysts warned about the risk of evidence destruction. Based on experience from previous cases, cartels often had pre-installed systems to self-immolate the warehouses or wipe data upon attack. Therefore, the technical team prepared jamming equipment and portable data storage units for a quick copy before deletion. Simultaneously, the DEA deployed small reconnaissance planes, flying at low altitudes to monitor vehicle traffic in and out of the Houston area. Any strange signal was sent directly to the command room. When the plan was complete, Donovan ordered the area lockdown. Teams performed final checks on power sources, GPS systems, and exit routes. In the heavy silence, everyone understood the level of risk. 3 cities, 11 targets, over 100 officers engaged. Any mistake could result in hostage casualties or the complete loss of evidence. On the large screen, the countdown timer appeared. Commanders in charge of each sector confirmed their ready status. Surveillance drones were airborne, signals stable. Donovan ordered absolute radio silence. As the clock hit 0, all commands were compressed into a single signal sent to the entire force. Initiate operation. Texas was about to be rocked by a raid of unprecedented scale in federal history. The action signal went out, and all forces moved simultaneously. Armored convoys sped down the Houston suburban roads, headlights slicing through the night, creating a chain of cold light. Internal communication systems switched to encryption mode. Within a 10-kilometer radius of the industrial park, all civilian devices lost signal. No traffic, no lights. The city fell silent before the storm erupted. The first metal door was blown open. The force buckled the steel frame, and dust and chemical smoke billowed out. The FBI assault team rushed in, armor and gas masks reflecting flashlight beams. Inside, figures quickly darted between rows of plastic barrels and chemical tanks. Footsteps pounded, and a few people fired wildly. 2 bullets penetrated a shield, lightly injuring a tactical officer's shoulder. The entire team reacted according to protocol, forming a line, advancing slowly, and securing each corner. 3 suspects were captured alive. 1 was neutralized on the spot. In the next warehouse, the DEA team entered through the roof, using ropes to avoid the sensor system. On the floor were wooden crates containing hundreds of sealed white powder packets. Each packet had a symbol matching the previously recovered data. At the back of the warehouse, they found an area sealed with a steel partition. After cutting the lock, the scene inside made the whole team pause. Over 24 people were confined in cramped metal cages, their clothes torn, skin dusted with chemicals, many too weak to stand. Field medics immediately approached, administering fluids, checking pulses, and moving the victims out. Some victims were unconscious but still showed signs of life. In Dallas, the DEA forces faced strong resistance. An armed group barricaded themselves in the central warehouse, using handguns and smoke bombs to block the way. The rapid response team deployed a bomb disposal robot and breached the door, then stormed in to secure the area. 4 suspects were injured, and 2 agents suffered minor burns from chemical leaks. Upon securing the area, they discovered an underground bunker containing hundreds of bags of near-pure crystal methamphetamine. The total weight was over 340 pounds, along with 89 pounds of fentanyl. In Austin, the FBI team apprehended the coordinators who were in the process of wiping data in a makeshift office. Computers, phones, and mini-servers were sealed immediately and handed over to the technical analysis team. Under the floor, they found a hidden safe containing files, a list of recruited people, and a plan for transport to other states. The entire operation lasted less than 10 minutes. 11 facilities were completely secured, over 20 suspects were arrested, and many others were being pursued around the industrial park. Medical units worked non-stop to save the rescued individuals. They were skinny, weak, and many had visible injuries. Despite minor losses on the federal side, the results exceeded expectations. Over the secure communication channel, Donovan heard the final report. Targets secured, victims safe, evidence fully seized. He did not reply, only looking up at the map of Texas where the signal lights were gradually turning off. Everything was silent, but everyone understood that this victory was only the surface of a network whose roots were yet to be fully exposed. As the smoke and sirens faded, the Houston Industrial Park was completely sealed off. Convoys of ambulances quietly left the scene. Inside the warehouses, mobile forensic teams began their work. Temporary stainless steel tables were set up, and data scanners and sample storage cabinets operated continuously. Outside, tactical officers rotated shifts, handing the scene over to the investigative team. No one rested, every minute was critical, as the criminals may have installed self-destruct systems for the data. The FBI technical team seized dozens of hard drives, phones, and mini-servers. The devices all had multi-layered encryption, timed to self-delete after 48 hours of inactivity. A team of specialists from Quantico was dispatched overnight, setting up a field decryption room in Warehouse Hash 4. Under white light, dozens of computers worked in parallel, extracting every piece of recovered data. The financial map began to take shape. 37 offshore accounts, 9 shell companies, and a massive chain of transactions spanning Texas, Panama, and the Cayman Islands. Initial data showed the criminal organization was not only trafficking humans and drugs. They had built a clandestine business network operating like a real corporation with an accounting department, a logistics division, a recruitment system, and even a phantom payroll. In the recovered files, specialists found periodic transfer contracts to multiple accounts in Mexico, noted as strategic partnership fees. Cross-referencing international records, these were 2 major cartels suspected of colluding in cross-border drug shipments. At the command center, Donovan reviewed the first consolidated report. The data showed the network had reached the scale of a mid-sized enterprise, with estimated annual revenue of hundreds of millions of dollars. The victims were turned into mobile assets. Each person was coded as a transportation unit, managed by statistical tables just like managing inventory. This method allowed them to both hide from surveillance and turn humans into calculable profits. The DEA Forensic Division analyzed the chemicals recovered from the scene, determining the methamphetamine purity was exceptionally high, over 95%. This proved the Texas facilities were not just transit points, but also semi-industrial production sites. Alongside the drugs, they found an unrecorded compound, used to keep the crystal stable during long-distance transport. At the same time, the personnel investigation team recovered a list of nearly 100 people considered human resources. These were missing individuals across Texas, New Mexico, and Louisiana. Part of the list was encrypted, the rest showed at least 10 other facilities had not been discovered. This reality made Donovan realize the recent operation only dismantled one branch of the system. An urgent report to Washington confirmed the link between the 2 Mexican cartels and the Texas network. They were not disconnected collaborators but co-founders of a transnational criminal alliance, operating on corporate principles. From Houston, the data was transferred to Quantico for in-depth analysis. Everyone in the command room realized they had just touched the heart of a global criminal machine, where borders, laws, and ethics were meaningless. Clean Streets was not over. It had just opened the second front, the information war. The sun rose over Houston in a heavy silence. Federal convoys left the industrial park, leaving behind dozens of sealed warehouses with yellow tape stretched across the concrete. In the command center, all data had been transferred to Quantico. Donovan stepped out for the first federal press conference since the operation began. Before hundreds of cameras, he declared, "The criminal system that turned human beings into logistics tools has been dismantled." No flowery words, just cold statistics: 20 ringleaders arrested, 31 people rescued, hundreds of pounds of drugs confiscated. Behind the speech, reports kept appearing. The map of Texas was dense with red markers. Places rescued, places still questionable. Every detail was publicly analyzed: financial evidence, transport routes, chemical compounds, the network of offshore accounts. The press called it the largest hybrid crime case in Texas history, where human and drug trafficking merged into a complete industry. In Washington, the Department of Justice opened a special file, treating Operation Clean Streets as a model for interagency coordination. The assessment report stated, "It didn't just solve a crime. It exposed the new operating method of modern criminals combining finance, manpower, and technology like a corporation." Simultaneously, human rights organizations were invited to support the recovery of the rescued individuals, many of whom suffered long-term injuries due to chemicals and malnutrition. However, intelligence from Quantico quickly chilled the celebratory mood. Decrypted data showed a part of the network had managed to reroute before the attack took place. New accounts were opened in New Mexico and Louisiana, and the human resources recruitment list was still active. Some victims were confirmed to have been moved to other states. The system took only a few days to restore its financial circulation. Donovan looked at the final report, saying nothing. The numbers were enough to show the enemy was still alive, just changing its skin. Operation Clean Streets won a big battle, but it couldn't stop the regeneration of industrial crime. The federal government immediately opened the next case file, codenamed Crossline, expanding the investigation across the southern United States. Against the backdrop of the American flag behind the podium, the line "The battle for Texas is won. The war has just begun" appeared on the morning news. That wasn't a propaganda slogan, it was the cold truth. Operation Clean Streets had ended, but the fight against the system that turned people into commodities had just begun.